parents sold my car, while I was away, to pay off my sister's debts. I was angry and cancelled all my plans and came with a lawyer. Now sister has lost her house. I was 2 weeks into a project in another state, focused and grinding. The company had sent me out to oversee an expansion, something I'd been waiting for, to be honest. It was a great opportunity, but it was also the kind of project that required 12-hour days and little time to think about anything else. So when my parents called me one night, their voices trembling, I wasn't expecting much more than a, "How's it going?" Instead, they hit me with this: "We sold your car." At first I thought they were joking. My car was technically registered in my dad's name because of a loan arrangement when I bought it, but I'd made every payment and used it for work for the past 3 years. I needed that car. And they knew that. I hadn't even fully processed it before I asked, "What do you mean you sold it? Why would you do that?" That's when they started explaining about an emergency involving my sister, Emily, and her husband, Fred. It turned out that Fred's gambling problem had gotten out of control. He wasn't just losing money on sports bets anymore. He'd started betting on other things, and they'd racked up debts so massive that debt collectors were involved. Apparently, it wasn't your average credit card debt either. They were short-term, high-interest loans that had ballooned to absurd amounts. It sounded like a bad dream. My parents said they'd done it because Emily and Fred were about to lose their house, the one my entire family had saved for and given them as a wedding present. It wasn't just a house, it was supposed to be their fresh start, a place to build their life together. "You sold my car," I said, trying to keep my cool, "to bail them out of a mess they made?" They kept talking, trying to justify it, saying they didn't have a choice. The collectors were threatening to take the house. They said. We had to act quickly. I was furious. "You didn't even call me first?" I could have done something. They tried to calm me down, but it was too late. I was done listening. I told them I'd be home the next day, cancelled my remaining work commitments, and started packing. The car wasn't just a car to me, it was freedom. It was the thing that got me where I needed to go, professionally and personally. And now it was gone because of Emily and Fred's selfishness. The worst part? I'd warned them. I'd warned my parents not to keep bailing them out when Fred's gambling started years ago. But no one ever listened. I booked a red-eye home that night. I didn't come to mediate or play nice. This wasn't just about my car, it was about my family's blind loyalty to Emily and Fred, no matter how many times they burned us. I wasn't going to let this go. I called my lawyer as soon as I landed. I landed early the next morning, running on 2 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline. My lawyer, Greg, had already started looking into what could be done. He wasn't just any lawyer, I'd known him for years. He had a knack for sniffing out shady deals, and if there was a way to fix this without me eating the loss, Greg would find it. I drove straight from the airport in a rental car and went to my parents' house. As soon as I walked in, I could feel the tension. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table, avoiding eye contact, while my dad looked like he was ready for a fight. "Okay," I said, dropping my bag on the floor. "You want to explain this to me again, from the beginning?" They told me everything. Emily and Fred had taken out short-term loans to support Fred's gambling. He wasn't even sticking to sports betting anymore, he was betting on random things like horse races he didn't understand and online games that sounded more like scams than legitimate bets. At first they managed to keep up with the payments, but then they started losing big time multiple times. When the collectors started threatening to sue and repossess their house, Emily turned to my parents and cried that she was going to lose everything. My parents panicked. They didn't want to see their daughter out on the street. My dad remembered that my car was still in his name, so he figured selling it would solve the immediate problem. A buyer quickly came along, paid cash, and they handed over the keys without a second thought. I just stood there stunned. Did you even ask Emily and Fred why they were in this situation? Or were you too busy bailing them out again? My dad looked defensive. We didn't have time. The collectors said they would act within days. Of course they said that. They always do. They didn't even bother to call me first. Mom jumped in and said something about how they thought they were protecting the family. But let's face it, this wasn't about the family. It was about Emily and Fred. They'd been making bad choices for years, and instead of letting them face the consequences, my parents kept enabling them. And here's the kicker. They didn't even get the full value of the car. They sold it way below market value just to get the money fast. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That car was worth a lot more than what they got, and now it was gone. Anger hit me like a wave. You didn't just sell my car, you sold my time. Do you even know how long I worked to pay this off? I turned to leave. Where's Emily? She's at her house, my mother said quietly. Not for long, I muttered. I went straight to Emily's house. The house was huge, way bigger than anything they could afford, but it had been the family's gift to them for their wedding. It wasn't supposed to be a status symbol, it was supposed to be a home. Now it was at the center of this disaster. Fred answered the door at 10 a.m., shirtless and holding a beer. He reeked of alcohol. I could barely look at him. Where's Emily? I asked. Fred shrugged. Upstairs. He didn't even bother to ask why I was there. I pushed past him and found Emily in the bedroom, sitting on the bed with her laptop. She looked up, surprised to see me. What are you doing here? She asked. I'm here because our parents sold my car to clean up your mess. Her face fell. I didn't ask them to do that. Oh, really? So what's your plan, Emily? Just keep gambling until you win big? Or maybe just keep begging Mom and Dad for more money until there's nothing left? She tried to defend herself by saying they were trying to win enough to get out of debt, but I wasn't buying it. This wasn't about one or two bad decisions, this was a pattern. Fred and Emily were addicted to the idea of easy money, and they didn't care who they hurt along the way. By the time I left their house, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this go. If they wanted to gamble their lives away, fine, but they weren't going to drag the rest of us down with them. I called Greg on the way back to the rental car. Greg, we've got a mess, I said. I need you to look into these collectors and see if there's anything illegal about what they're doing. And we need to figure out how to deal with Emily and Fred before they ruin everything. Greg didn't hesitate. Send me all the details you have. We'll figure it out. For the first time since my parents had called, I felt like I was in control again. But I knew this wasn't going to be a clean fight. Greg worked quickly. By the time I got back to my parents' house, he'd already uncovered a lot about the situation. The collectors who were after Emily and Fred weren't exactly playing by the rules. They were using scare tactics, threatening legal action they weren't even authorized to take, and charging sky-high interest rates that pushed the loans into predatory territory. That gave us leverage, but it didn't change the core problem. Emily and Fred were still a financial black hole. I sat down with my parents that night. Here's the thing, I said. The collectors are not on solid legal ground. We can negotiate with them, but there's no point if Emily and Fred keep gambling. This cycle won't stop until they hit rock bottom. My mother looked heartbroken. We can't just let them lose the house. It's all they have. And whose fault is that? I shot back. They had a house, one that we all helped them get, and they turned it into collateral for Fred's gambling addiction. Are you going to keep sinking everything we have into them? Because I'm done. That shut the room down. My dad tried to argue, but even he couldn't deny the truth. The next morning, Greg and I met with the collectors. They weren't thrilled to see a lawyer, but Greg knew how to handle them. He pointed out the illegal interest rates and the scare tactics they'd been using, and within an hour they caved. They agreed to take the house in full payment, no extra fees, no outstanding debt. When I called Emily to tell her, she was furious. They had no right, she yelled over the phone. No right? Are you kidding me? I snapped. You should be thanking me. You're losing the house because of your decisions, not mine. If it wasn't for me, you'd still owe them more than you could pay in 3 lifetimes. She tried to blame Fred, saying he was the one who got them into this mess, but I wasn't having it. You're just as responsible as he is. You could have stopped him, but instead you went along with it. When the deal with the collectors was done, I thought that would be the end of it. But of course it wasn't. Fred and Emily had nowhere to go, so guess where they ended up? My parents took them in. I told them it was a mistake, but they wouldn't listen. They just need some time to get back on their feet, my mother said. Time won't fix this, I warned. They don't need a free place to stay, they need accountability. But my parents couldn't say no to Emily, even after all she'd done. It took only a few weeks for the situation to spiral out of control. Fred wasn't just sitting around. He was drinking constantly, picking fights with my dad, and trying to borrow money from anyone who would listen. Emily wasn't much better. She spent her days complaining about how unfair life was and blaming everyone but herself. Meanwhile, my parents were calling me more and more, asking for help. Can you send some money for food? My mother asked one day. No, I said flatly. You made that decision. You deal with it. It was harsh, but I wasn't going to enable her anymore. I'd done enough by getting the collectors off their backs. If they wanted to continue to support Emily and Fred, that was up to them. But then, 6 months later, it all came to a head. My parents called me in a panic. They couldn't afford to continue supporting Emily and Fred's drinking was out of control. We don't know what to do, my mother said, practically begging. You throw him out, I said. That's what you do. If he doesn't want to change, he's not your problem. It took weeks of arguing, but they finally did it. Fred was out, and Emily had to deal with the fallout. For the first time in years, she began to take a hard look at her life. Without Fred dragging her down, she realized how far she'd fallen. It wasn't an instant turnaround. There were still a lot of tears, a lot of blame, and a lot of denial, but slowly she began to rebuild. As for me, I kept my distance. My parents tried to make things right, but I wasn't ready to forgive them. They'd chosen Emily over me too many times, and I wasn't going to pretend everything was okay just because they finally saw the consequences of their choices. By the time I sold the rental car and got a new one, I felt like a stranger to my own family. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the one I could live with. Things seemed to calm down after Fred was kicked out. Emily moved back in with my parents and tried to get her life back together. She got a part-time job at a local boutique, which shocked everyone since she hadn't worked in years. My parents were cautiously optimistic, but I wasn't. I was doing everything I could to stay out of the drama, focusing on work and rebuilding my savings after the chaos. I hadn't spoken to Fred since he got kicked out, and frankly, I thought I was done with him. Then, out of the blue, Fred called me. I stared at my phone in disbelief before I answered. What do you want? Look, man, I know we had our differences, but I need your help. His voice was shaky and I could hear cars honking in the background. I have a plan to turn things around. I just need some money to get started. I almost laughed. You've got to be kidding me. After everything you've done, you think I'm going to give you money? Just hear me out, he pleaded. I've been working with a guy who knows how to beat the system. He's a pro at online gambling, he's got algorithms and everything. We've had a few wins already, but we need a bigger bankroll to really make it work. I hung up before he could finish. The audacity of this guy was staggering. I thought that was the end of it, but 2 days later my parents called to say that Fred had shown up at their house demanding to talk to Emily. My dad had told him to leave, but Fred wasn't the kind of guy to back down easily. Later that night, my mother called again, crying. Apparently, Fred had come back while they were out and broken into the house. He took a bunch of Emily's stuff, including her laptop and some cash my parents had hidden in a drawer. That was the last straw for me. I drove over to their house the next morning and told them we were going to call the police. No, my mom said in a panic. He's still Emily's husband. We can't do that to her. Are you serious? He broke into your house and stole from you. What's it going to take for you to wake up? My dad looked defeated, but I wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug. I called the police myself and filed a complaint. Fred was arrested a few days later, and it turned out he had a string of similar incidents on his record. That should have been the end of Fred's involvement in our lives, but it wasn't. The unexpected twist came when Emily dropped a bombshell on us. 2 weeks after Fred's arrest, Emily announced that she was pregnant. I didn't believe it at first. "Are you sure it's his?" I asked bluntly. She glared at me. "Of course it's his. I found out just before we threw him out. I didn't tell anyone because I wasn't sure what to do." Now the stakes were even higher. My parents were devastated. My mom immediately started talking about how they were going to support Emily and the baby, and my dad looked like he was going to have a heart attack. As for me, I couldn't believe the timing. It felt like a sick joke. "Let me guess," I said. "You're planning on letting Fred back into your life because of this, aren't you?" Emily hesitated. "He's still the father of my child. That doesn't make him a good father," I snapped. Emily insisted that she wouldn't let Fred back in, but I didn't trust her. Sure enough, a few weeks later I found out she'd been visiting him in jail. When I confronted her, she broke down. "I can't do this alone," she said. "I need help." "Then get it somewhere else," I told her. "Fred's not going to change. You know that." But Emily was stubborn, and my parents were too soft to stand up to her. They let her keep making excuses for Fred, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he wormed his way back into their lives. Then something unexpected happened. Fred's professional gambler friend, the one he'd been working with, got caught in a police sting for running an illegal gambling ring. And guess who was involved? Fred. The authorities began digging into Fred's finances and uncovered a web of fraud, including fake accounts and stolen identities. Suddenly, this wasn't just about gambling anymore, it was a full-blown criminal investigation. The fallout was massive. Emily's name was linked to some of the accounts, even though she claimed she didn't know anything about them. My parents were terrified that she would be arrested, but luckily Greg stepped in again and managed to prove that she wasn't involved. Fred wasn't so lucky. He ended up with multiple charges and a long prison sentence. Emily was a wreck after this. A few months later she gave birth to a baby boy, and for the first time I saw a real change in her. She cut all ties with Fred and started going to therapy. She even moved out of my parents' house and got her own apartment. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a turning point. As for me, I kept my distance. I'd done what I could for my family, but I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their mess. After Fred's conviction, Emily was forced to face reality in a way she never had before. It wasn't just her life she had to think about anymore, it was her son's. She named him Jake, and from the moment he was born, it was as if she finally understood what responsibility meant. Raising Jake as a single mother wasn't easy, especially since she'd been out of the workforce for so long. But she surprised us all. Emily began to take things seriously. She worked her part-time job at the boutique while taking night classes at a local community college to earn a certificate in accounting. My parents, of course, were her safety net. They babysat for Jake whenever she needed to, and my mom practically lived for the kid. Every time I stopped by, she was in the kitchen making something for him: macaroni and cheese, star-shaped pancakes, or those little peanut butter sandwiches she swore he loved. At first I kept my distance. The whole situation still felt raw, and I wasn't ready to forgive them for the way they'd handled things with Fred. But when Jake turned 1, something changed. I went to his birthday party, mostly out of obligation, and saw Emily with him. She was completely different. Gone was the self-pitying, entitled version of her I'd grown accustomed to. She was patient, calm, and genuinely happy, even though her life was harder than ever. I stayed late that night after everyone else had left. I asked her how she was doing, and for the first time she didn't sugarcoat it. "It's hard," she admitted. "Some days I'm so tired I don't know how I'm going to make it. But Jake makes it worth it. I don't want him to grow up thinking the world owes him something. I want to do better for him." That's when I decided to step in. Not for Emily, but for Jake. I set up a small savings account for him, something he could use when he was older for school or anything else he might need. I didn't tell Emily at first, but eventually I did. "You don't have to do that," she said when I told her. "I know," I replied. "But it's for him, not for you. I also helped her with small things, groceries, some baby supplies, things like that. It wasn't about fixing her life for her. It was about making sure Jake got off to a good start. In time, my relationship with my parents began to heal as well. They'd learned their lesson after everything with Fred. They stopped enabling Emily and started encouraging her to stand on her own 2 feet. My dad even helped her find a better job through one of his old work connections. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and gave her the stability she needed. A few years later, Emily got her own place, a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Jake had his own room, decorated with dinosaurs and stars, and Emily made sure he had everything he needed. My parents still helped out when they could, but it wasn't like before. Emily was finally independent, and she was proud of it. As for me, I stayed involved but kept my boundaries. I'd visit Jake on the weekends, take him to baseball games, or just hang out at the park. He was a bright kid, curious, funny, and nothing like his father. Emily made sure of that. By the time Jake started kindergarten, things felt normal again. Emily was working full-time, my parents were retired and spoiling Jake with love and way too many toys, and Fred was nothing more than a bad memory. One Thanksgiving, we all sat around the table together, me, my parents, Emily, and Jake, and it hit me how far we'd come. The drama, the fights, the betrayals, they were all behind us. "Thanks for staying," Emily said to me that night after Jake went to bed. "I know I screwed up a lot, but I couldn't have done it without you." "I didn't do it for you," I said with a grin, but we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Today, Jake is in middle school, Emily is an accountant at a small firm, and my parents are as happy as they've ever been. And Fred? No one has heard from him in years. And frankly, that's for the best. Our family isn't perfect, but we've found a way to move forward. Sometimes you don't get the happy ending you imagine, but if you're lucky, you get a fresh start. And for us, that was enough. A few weeks after things settled down, I finally asked my parents, "So, what happened to the money from my car?" My dad looked uncomfortable. "It all went to the collectors," he said. "We're sorry, but we had no choice." I was still bitter, but my mother added, "We've been saving to pay you back. It's not much yet, but we'll get there." Over the next year, they gave me small amounts when they could. It wasn't the full value, but it helped me put a down payment on a new car this time, all in my name. Losing that car had been a wake-up call for all of us, in more ways than one.